Hey, we're live. How you doing, Ari?
Doing great. How are you?
Good. Okay. So I don't know what week number this makes us, but there's quite a few. Ari and I have spent the last 20 minutes just kind of like making sure we had the topics down as far as things that we were going to cover today, and it's been a busier week for immigration developments with some major things than probably last week was. And the stuff that we're seeing kind of literally hits the most destitute to the richest people in the world on this, and you'll understand why as we go through these things. So, Ari, at the beginning of this 7-day period, there was an announcement on Haiti
On Haiti. Okay.
and TPS. So, what did the government or USCIS or DHS, I guess, what did they announce with respect to Haitian TPS?
So this is very important. Anyone who has is from Haiti with TPS needs to be aware of this. And unfortunately, there's going to be people who are caught up in this who just don't realize it happened. So originally, the Biden administration redesignated, extended Haiti for a period until February 3rd, 2026. Okay. The Trump administration has now announced that they are cutting that back. They're not getting rid of it, but they're cutting it back to August 3rd, 2025. So that means anyone who has TPS and was issued a work authorization card that's valid, that appears to be valid until February 3rd, 2026, it's no longer valid till that date. It is only valid till August 3rd, 2025. And if you have an application for an extension, new AD pending, that will be adjudicated, but it will only be given an August 3rd date. And after August 3rd, they won't be adjudicating EADs for TPS. I don't think they went out and said for certain that they weren't going to be extending TPS beyond that, but it does give us what to think about.
Yeah, and they told us what they thought about Haitians during the campaign.
Yeah. So I think that we're probably not looking at getting an extension beyond August 3rd, which is going to send a lot of people scrambling that they thought they had.
So but they're basically, when they screw around with these dates and they try and change them, they are, I guess one of the issues is with employers. On there, they sort of like basically assume employers just go and check on a regular basis at uscis.gov and to see what kind of changes are being made, which I'm pretty sure that most employers don't do that. They might be hearing about this, secondhand from their workers. They might be, but normally an employer is not under the INA obligated midstream to go back and re-verify somebody's employment authorization document that was valid until a certain period of time.
I'll rephrase that. Not only they're not obligated, they're not allowed to go back and ask for documentation if they have, were given documentation to a certain period. They're not, unless they have specific knowledge, they're not allowed to. So this seems to take the stance that USCIS thinks that them making this announcement gives employers that knowledge that they then have to go and re-verify those employees, or not re-verify, but to change
that. I would love to defend that employer in litigation if DOJ and USCIS tried to take the position that the employer had knowledge because they made this announcement, unless they send a specific letter to every employer, which they won't know.
I haven't heard. Yeah, I mean, how do they know which employers? Yeah, there's no way of knowing.
Employers are not obligated to go back midstream and check for people with valid employment authorization documents that something hasn't changed.
Again, I'm going to say you're saying they're not required. They're not allowed to. It's not a matter of requirement. They're not allowed to.
So that's the first problem for the government when they do that kind of thing, is that they may be stopping people from having work authorization, but good luck trying to go after an employer for something that you put on a website that is contrary to what as you just said, to the way the law works. Second, we just, we've just seen a couple of cases drop on TPS for Venezuela, which we've talked about in past episodes, where they're trying to do similar things, where they're shortening the period. And let me just say, TPS, there's a lot of discretion on the part of the president, and that is true. The president, but it's usually in one direction. The president has authority through TPS to grant, to grant TPS to a country, and it is very difficult. Unlike the parole programs, it's very difficult for a court to come in and say, we want to overturn the president's decision to grant TPS to a particular country. However, it doesn't go the opposite way, where if the president decides unilaterally to take TPS away, that the president has unilateral authority to do that without any oversight and has unfettered discretion. He does not. The president needs to be able to demonstrate that there are changed country conditions so that it is safe to go back. Otherwise, a court can overrule the president, which happened in the first Trump administration with the Central American countries, where all of a sudden the Trump said we're ending those countries. They went to court, and a judge said, you haven't shown us any reason to believe that anything's gotten better in these countries and that it's safe to go back. Venezuela, all we know is right now that the president is trying to make nice with Maduro, but people have, 1/3 of the entire country of Venezuela has fled the country. So unless there's sort of been a major change in government there, and there's some evidence that people are not fearing being in the country anymore, I think that's a pretty strong case for the plaintiffs. And I think Haiti's even more of an example of that. Whereas
Haiti, it was just redesignated. They didn't just extend it; they redesignated, which
right.
makes it even more so that things changed in 6 months, that it's no longer.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if who is going to sue on Haiti, but I am very comfortable that there is going to be a suit on Haiti. I will tell you that Impact Litigation, which is the group I'm part of, if no one steps forward and wants to sue on Haiti, we will do it. But there are groups that are no doubt going to do it. I'm very confident there are groups that represent the Haitian community that I don't think will hesitate to do it. And my guess is it will probably be in the next week or two that we're probably going to. If we don't have a suit filed, we'll probably know who's working on that suit and when it's going to be filed. Very confident that issue is going to be litigated. So that's issue number one, Haiti. I think we'll get to these issues. I mean, some of the really big ones and the ones that have been in the news the last 24 hours, we'll get to sort of later. So I know what people want to know about. There was a win yesterday.
I just want to remind people that you can, if you post your comments in the comments section, we will see them.
A lot of you are here, but we're not seeing any of the questions yet.
We want to hear from you.
Right. So if you're watching this on our LinkedIn page, just post a comment like you would to any LinkedIn post, and we will see that comment and answer it. That's how it works here. If you're watching this on Twitter, just post a reply like you would to a Twitter post or X post or whatever it is over there. We will see it. Same on YouTube. So that's all you have to do. Facebook, same story on there. Okay. The next thing, Ari, I wanted to mention was there were two lawsuits. One was a good case for immigrants. One was not a great case for immigrants. And I'll mention the first one, the refugee ban case. This was filed by a number of refugee organizations. One that I'm particularly fond of is HIAS, HIAS. They are an organization that is the world's oldest refugee organization. I served on their board for 12 years. They helped my family. We've, over the years, loved fundraising for them. Wonderful organization. They are one of the plaintiffs. And basically what this stems from is in the executive orders from day one, the president said he was suspending indefinitely the country's refugee program. Said he might bring it back at some point, but for now they were suspending it. That led to a whole cascade of effects, including There were there were planes of refugees that were basically ready to go. That had, and it's like a 2-year vetting process for these people that come over in the refugee program. They are very, very closely vetted, and these are people who've been waiting steadily. They they have to work with contractors in the U.S. that help these people resettle so that they do well once they get here. There's a whole infrastructure basically that was cut off at the knees when the president made that announcement. And it's caused genuine hardship for those organizations, not just for the refugees, but obviously that's super, super bad news for them. But for the refugee organizations themselves, many of them have had to have layoffs. They have had they've had to really struggle over the last month trying to react to that news. Anyway, they got a win in court yesterday, where a judge said they have to resume processing refugees. It's not a win yet, but it's and it was in court in Seattle, which is where the birthright citizenship first decision came in. I don't know which judge it was, but in any case, it was good news on refugees. I don't know, in the long run, whether the president has a lot of authority to set how many refugees come into the U.S. But that's
Judge Jamal Whitehead.
Okay, so it's not the same judge, a different judge than the judge in the birthright citizenship case. But anyway, that's so that was the good case this week from an immigration perspective. The bad case was on EB4, the special immigrant religious worker category. There was another attempt a few years ago, there had been an unsuccessful attempt in the Ninth Circuit to try and force USCIS to accept concurrent filings of I-360s and adjustment applications. And the thinking was that it was a violation of the Establishment Clause, that they were having one system for religious workers, and for everybody else, they had a different system. There was another attempt, I believe it was in the Seventh Circuit, where there was an effort to try the same argument, and that was also, and that unfortunately the Ninth Circuit argument influenced the judge in the Seventh Circuit, and the judge said no. That's one of the issues with religious workers that's being litigated right now. The other one that is in the works, I believe it's already been filed, as a case that for special immigrant religious workers, they had been separated from other people in the special immigrant category in terms of green card quotas. And the Biden administration decided everybody gets put into the same category together. And then all of a sudden there was a crisis for religious workers because they get a maximum of 5 years on an R1 visa. And right now, because of this change in policy, they're facing backlogs longer than 5 years in the religious worker category. So there's a forced gap in status. And these people have nothing in between to keep them here legally. A lot of congregations, I think
we're having to look at other categories also for it.
Yeah, which is not so easy.
Options for some of them, but it's definitely not the way it's supposed to work when they created the system.
By the way, I did some really interesting research on this. There was a history professor that came and spoke in Memphis about 2 years ago, a guy named Jonathan Sarna. He's a scholar on American Jewish history. And I was interested in something that he had written, which was a piece that's actually very relevant to this discussion today regarding religious workers. He wrote this paper about the 1924 Act, and it had this impact on the rabbis coming to the United States from Europe. At that time, there was a very similar thing going on in the United States to right now. There was a very big anti-immigrant backlash to a lot of years of very robust immigration through Ellis Island. In fact, there's a very sizable portion of the American population that traces their roots through Ellis Island during that period of time, and chances are their family members.
And also through Galveston.
Yeah, but they were this was a reaction largely to that population coming in, where they slammed the door and they made it very difficult for immigration, legal immigration to the U.S. for many years. It had tragic consequences a decade later when the Nazis came to power in Germany, and all of a sudden there was no way for most of the Europeans that were subject to Nazi persecution to be able to get into the United States. That's the story. A lot of people know that part of it. What they don't know is that there had been jurisprudence over the years saying that Congress had to tread very carefully on setting immigration restrictions on religious workers, and that the Establishment Clause and basically that the government should not be determining who a Catholic church or any other type of religious organization, who they can and cannot hire to lead their congregations. Anyway, the Supreme Court decision, it dates back to like the 1880s, and Congress tried to restrict it, and there had been and anyway, there was case law saying they couldn't do that. So Congress caved, and they basically they wrote in some exceptions for religious workers because they knew that the courts were going to rule potentially the whole act being unconstitutional. And during the 1930s, in particular, when most Jews were basically stuck in Europe and millions died, there was a regular flow of rabbis that managed to come to the United States because of this jurisprudence.
I think you remember I told you we were talking about this last week. My family, my great grandfather was able to come here as a rabbi in that time frame, saved, and then he was able to bring his family.
He's probably a beneficiary of that statute.
I'm only alive because of that, of his ability to do that, to come as a rabbi.
So I sent this on. There is a case that's pending right now where people are suing over this issue on the division of EB4's numbers between all the special immigrant juveniles and the religious workers and all that. And I sent this to him and said, you really should make the case that having any quota on religious workers is a violation of the Constitution on there, and that they and go back to those old cases. I sent Professor Sarna's article to the one of the lawyers working on it. I don't know if where that case is right now, but I thought that it's a pretty influential argument, particularly when you're going back to cases that old, where and we're talking about the major constitutional principles here. So we'll see. Anyway, so that case, the EB4 case in the Seventh Circuit wasn't great, but hopefully that's not the end of the story regarding religious workers on there. It's a big problem. I understand that. I think I'd seen the figure that 40% of Catholic churches have either foreign priests or they're unable to find American priests. I forget what the figure is, but it's a huge number, particularly for that denomination. And that religious faith, but it's a problem in a lot of communities where they can't find religious workers. So hopefully that's something that Congress has also been looking at. That there is a bipartisan bill actually that is intended to do something similar for R1s that they did for H1Bs, where you'll be able to extend the R1 as long as necessary until you're current in the for your I-360. On there. So if that happened, that would be good news.
I mean, they should at least do something like what they, with the H-1B, that if you have the, EB4 petition filed, that you should be able to get extensions of the R while waiting for a visa to become available.
Yeah. Okay. Next, I have on my list the first travel ban. And it's not under the travel ban. 212F is the section for travel bans. That's not where this comes in.
This is even worse.
This is even worse. This involves transgender folks who do not basically toe the line and say answer the questions that the way the Trump administration wants those questions answered, even if your passport says has been, that you are says the gender that your government recognizes that you are now, and you are just answering the question consistent with your own passport. That's not good enough. And what they're doing is they're basically saying that it's immigration fraud if you answer the question the way that you believe it should be answered versus the way the Trump administration wants it to be answered.
Right. And that's not how they're promoting this, though. They're promoting this as and again, not that this is any better, but they're promoting this as it's just a ban on trans athletes coming to the US.
We looked at it, and
looking at the way it's worded, it's not.
It's all trans folks, not just the athletes on there. So they can clarify that if they want. I'm not sure that but I don't think they want.
I said that's in the news. That's when they were announcing it. That's how they announced it.
So there was the Guardian. The Guardian's a good online. It's a good newspaper, and it's a good online newspaper, and they broke that story. So congrats to them. However, their headline writer didn't do a service to their readership by saying that this was about athletes when it was a much broader ban than that. And a fraud ban is This is lifetime.
It's a permanent bar. It is. It's a permanent bar.
Terrible. But
pretty much not most immigration benefits, but all the ones that most people.
I am guessing. We'll see. We'll have the recording. I'm guessing that next week, when this live stream happens, that there will be litigation on that issue already filed.
I mean, the way I explain it to people, to make sure that they understand, don't lie to the government, is it's this bar is the death sentence for immigration purposes.
Yeah, it's a I understand. As immigration lawyers, we just we can't tell people what to do. We tell them what the law is and what the consequences are for not following the law, which we're going to get to in a second on another issue that's similar to this. But that being said, I would, if you are not comfortable with that, I would wait until the courts make the decision on this. If you say I will not change the way I'm answering that question, I think the courts are going to make this issue go away. But I would be nervous about acting in the meantime against what this policy says on here.
I'm also very curious as to how they plan to implement it, because it's previously you don't normally, when you apply for a non-immigrant visa to come in as an athlete, you don't normally provide your birth certificate. You provide your passport. So if your passport has your preferred gender, then I'm not, what are they going to say? Profiling, that sort of thing, and say, oh, well, you don't look like a woman or you don't look like a man. Let me see your birth certificate before I issue this. I don't know how this is going to work. It's going to be a mess.
Yeah.
It's going to be a mess.
All right. Well, that's
I just also want to give some background to that also, just to mention that part of this is even more so political, because one of the things that the Biden administration did towards the end of their administration was to finally change USCIS policies to allow people to list their preferred gender listing rather than what was listed on their passport. They changed it to allow.
They also, for U.S. citizens, allowed U.S. citizens to have their passports changed as well to reflect what their gender is now, not what it was at birth.
So this is, one of those things where, we go one way with the administration, and then he's gone totally the opposite way with threatening this fraud bar. If you look at it now, they made the changes. Now if in the Q&As and such, it says that you have to list whatever is on your birth certificate, even if your passport says otherwise. You have to list what's on your birth certificate. For them to then go and threaten a permanent 212A succeed bar, permanent bar for fraud is, it's outrageous.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, Ari, you like the new background? My office is finally finished the renovation, although I haven't hung the pictures up yet. We have our book.
Nice.
Prominent display right there. Ari and I go out there.
I got all 3 versions of it right here.
Yeah. Anyway, so no more blurring, thankfully. Okay, so Ari, now we're on to the sort of the 2 headliner issues. The one that
wasn't the headliner. I thought that
you sent me a text last night. I was attending a conference in Washington all day yesterday about artificial intelligence and other issues that relate to legal. My mind was not that much on immigration, although I couldn't help but post a few things on LinkedIn. But I was thinking about other things, and Ari texted me something cryptic on this what was it I forget what you had said, but it was about but we're talking it was basically, I hadn't heard yet about the gold card.
Okay. Yeah.
And I when I think of a gold card, it was like a real prestigious thing when you were like a young person and you went out and got your first credit card and you went like, I'm going for it. I'm going for the gold card.
If these gold cards are not made out of gold, I'm going to be really disappointed. Or at least, again, we were saying, both Lynn and I said,
the price said
that it should be
to give you a piece of gold.
It's gotta be. Yeah, let's say that. I said at the very least, it's got to be like those Amex cards. It's got to be a gold colored metal card. You get your gold metal green card,
a prestige card.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, so
and then it should get you in through global processing. Separate lines at the airport for it too.
Well, let's say
we're joking.
There may be some people who didn't hear about what this thing is. So basically, what our president said was, well, first of all, the EB-5 category, there is a category for rich people that want to get green cards. And that category is the immigrant investor EB-5 category for people who invest $1 million and change or 800,000 and change, depending on how the unemployment rate in the area. And they have to create 10 jobs for U.S. workers. It has a very strict quota of 10,000 a year. So basically about 3,000 families can use this category. It gets backlogged. Takes forever for the agency to adjudicate the decisions. There's always litigation on it. I've been a lawyer for the plaintiffs in at least one of the lawsuits. Anyway, the president suddenly announces, we need to get rid of EB-5 and replace it with this other one. First of all, EB-5 just underwent a major reform package in 2022 that is just getting going right now, where a lot of the things that the president was griping about with respect to EB-5 have all just been addressed.
Right. And I want to say that it's not the regulation change. This was Congress passed these changes, which is important to understand because it's not,
it's like the only significant piece of immigration legislation in 20 years.
And then the president wants to throw it out. That's talk about
there were a lot of Republican senators that worked on that bill, which this was a major insult to their work because they worked very hard to get that legislation. All that aside, maybe they keep the EB-5 program. If they want to keep EB-5 and then add this other program on top of it, the president is suggesting $5 million is the price tag and no other information about who qualifies. So
he said $5 million. You pay $5 million to the government, U.S. government. It's basically a tax. You pay the $5 million to the government, and he's saying that's gonna
no quota,
get rid of the debt. I did the math. We need 7 million applicants in order to pay down the debt, $5 million at a time.
I'm sure there are 7 million people that want U.S. citizenship.
I guarantee
even
there's
though
7 million people out there who'd be willing to pay $5 million for them and their families. It's not just 7 million. It's going to be, that would be more like,
But Ari, the people that have that kind of money don't like the U.S. tax system and don't want to be U.S. citizens because they don't want to be subject to U.S. tax on their worldwide income. They're putting people with that kind of money are putting their money in places where they're not taxed at all. That is the problem number one. Unless they fix the tax system to protect these people, which they are not going to do. That's problem number one. Problem number two with this system is that they have they didn't mention. We think that this might be no quota or anything like that, but that breaks a cardinal rule that a lot of Republicans have, which says they will not allow quota-free green card categories. So it's like, okay,
for someone who can pay $5 million, that's an exception.
Maybe. The other thing I thought was interesting about this is, and I was mentioning it today. I have two clients that are very. This would not be a problem for them qualifying for that, and but they have another problem, which is they are undocumented immigrants. Believe it or not, there are undocumented immigrants in this country who've been fabulously successful building companies and building as entrepreneurs. In fact, it's sort of like one of the only options available to you when you can't get employed legally is to not be employed and be running a business. And a lot of very successful people are in that boat. I would be very curious about whether they would get this category or not, and what are they still going to be subject to the reentry bars for overstaying or unlawful entry to the U.S. if they in fact had the money to qualify under this program? Would they say no to the $5 million and say we're not fixing your status on there? I don't know. That's not clear. My guess is they have no idea that there are people that would qualify potentially that way. So I would be curious if whether this wipes out. And we were joking I
wouldn't get your hopes up on anybody's hopes up on that, because
we were joking that it's like, it's not really a gold card if it doesn't get rid of all of those baloney, of all of those inadmissibility things like that.
We were saying that you'd have the gold card for the people for one people, and then the people that need it to have to be used as a waiver also, they'd have the platinum card.
Right, they had the platinum.
They have to pay extra.
This is basically Trump's card is basically
$10 million.
It's a silver card. It is not a gold card. It's certainly not a titanium card or a platinum card unless it deals with those issues, in my opinion. So I'm just putting that out there. Right. Anyway, I don't have a lot of.
Bottom line, we don't know yet what, if anything's going to happen. But they love to make the announcement. They made the announcement from the Oval Office that they're going to have this gold card.
So this is basically a presidential musing.
Right.
It's not really a serious proposal. There's not a bill out there. There's not any, reasonable. Now, the president could, so I did see some person like the president, only Congress can pass these things. The president can do other things, though, like he can have parole and all that. And it's like, no one's paying $5 million unless they are basically getting fast tracked to U.S. citizenship.
Right.
On there. So, by the way, this idea of making a donation to the country is not. So that sounds really weird for us as Americans. There are actually a number of investment programs in other countries that have that option where you can invest in a business in that area, or you can just make a donation to the treasury of the country at a smaller amount on there. So that part of it, that doesn't strike me as that strange, although that's a very high price. This is definitely the highest price for any investment category of any country in the world. So there needs to be, there needs to be a few more perks to make this worthwhile. All right, let's move on to the.
Also, just to remind people again, the comment stops. So there's you can if you post your comments
Yeah, we're gonna get. Yeah, we got comments here. We're gonna get to them when we
right.
get them.
We are going to get to your comments, and those who want to still continue posting, go ahead and post your questions or comments.
Yeah. All right. So the last thing is
before we say that, though, I do want to say at one point, you talked about this will get rid of the EB5. He doesn't like the EB5. The problem with what he's trying to do versus EB5, the EB5 specifically, the money you pay has to be invested. It has to create a minimum of 10 new U.S. jobs. And so it is a job creation by its nature. It is a job creation visa. Right. It's not about the amount of money that the person is investing. It's about the jobs that they're creating, and that's just the direct and immediate indirect jobs. That's not all the other further indirect jobs. But and it does not seem from what they were saying that this $5 million he was saying just goes to the government to pay down the debt. It creates a single job. So you're going to take a program that was it 10,000 times 10 creates a minimum of 100,000 jobs in the U.S. and do away with it completely so that you can get people to pay a tax to pay down the government's debt.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of having a program like that.
Yeah,
as
no problem with the program. Just get rid of
EB5. Like keep EB5.
Yeah.
Which, as you say, it serves a different purpose.
Right.
But if people just want to write a big check and make a donation to reduce the debt in the United States, and they, the chances are people that are in that position are interested in investing in lots of things in the United States.
$5 million, you could probably get yourself a congressional bill.
I don't know. You say that, and then the how many private bills have been
private bill? Sorry, private bill. Yeah,
not too many.
Well, no one's spending $5 million
on a more serious topic because this is sort of semi-serious. It got a lot of news coverage, but I don't think a lot of people think it's going to happen. There is something that is probably going to happen, and Ari, I want to show this announcement that was posted. I'm going to do something we don't do that often here. I'm going to share the screen, and let's see if we tell me. Yeah. So this was an announcement that was posted yesterday, I believe. Was it yesterday that it was posted? Yes.
Yeah. Yesterday,
25th. And it is bringing back something that was put into immigration law about 25 years ago or 24 years ago after 9/11.
When I was a baby lawyer.
Yeah. And basically what was going on at that time was after the hijackers for the jets that crashed into the buildings, they entered the U.S. on non-immigrant visas, and there was a concern that there were cells operating in the United States, and that there was some panic that was happening in the country about the populations from certain countries. So they passed this bill. It was I don't know if it was part of the Patriot Act or it was done separately, but it was done, and it basically required people to register with USCIS, and they had to actually it was called NSEERS, the National something something something, and they had people from certain Muslim countries had to go in. Men had to go in and register.
The National Security Entry Exit Registration System.
Right. That was done under the Section 262, I believe, of the act. I'm not 100% positive because honestly, it's been so long. But this is still on the books. And basically it's I guess up to the discretion of the of USCIS to determine how it works on there. But basically it was in effect for about a year and a half, NSEERS. And then they basically figured out that this is not making the country any safer, and it was creating a lot of animosity in immigrant communities. So they ended that, but the law didn't go away. They just decided
they didn't fully end it until much later because they still were using it. They just didn't get
right.
new. Yeah.
the law itself has been on the books all these years. It just hasn't been used. And it wasn't even used during the first Trump administration, which kind of is surprising at this point that that was the case when they were doing travel bans and all this other stuff, and they didn't do this. But they are bringing back registration. And this time they are applying it to a much broader group of people. And it's worth probably going, if you just Google USCIS and registration, you'll find this page pops up right at the top on here. But basically what they're doing is they're saying anybody who's over the age of 14 who wasn't fingerprinted already as part of their application process, or for when they came into the US, and who's going to remain in the United States for 30 days or longer, has to register.
Right. It's all non-US citizens. Now let me just say, there is a similar idea, I guess, for green card holders who get their green cards when they're kids, because they don't fingerprint them under the age of 14. That when they turn 14 are supposed to reapply for their card, which has them get fingerprinted and get that. They then get a card that has the separate biometrics in it that they don't have when they're under 14. So when they started creating those biometric cards, they started.
So what they're saying is there's a lot of people who are registered under the views of the government already. So let's talk about those people don't have to. They can ignore this. And let's show the list of people that they have on here. People, lawful permanent residents, green card
holders.
People that were paroled into the U.S. Had to be fingerprinted, and when they were paroled in, they are surprising. They hate that category, but they're counting them here.
I mean, again, just to be clear, it's under the 212D5, so it's not everybody that if you got advanced parole. And we're coming in, then you don't.
But you'll have
necessarily fingerprinted, but
you'll have right. Well,
you probably were fingerprinted. That's like you probably were fingerprinted, but just to be clear, it's people who, if you haven't been fingerprinted, even if you were paroled in, you still have to register.
All right. Then we've got a very sizable chunk of folks that I know that are watching this that came in on non-immigrant visas and were issued I-94s. You're not covered by this. Okay.
Right. You're not required to register.
Right. Anybody who
I would say it's interesting. Even if your I-94 has expired, so someone who came here with a visa, issued an I-94.
Overstay. That's right. That's an interesting part of this.
Someone who overstayed their status
they're not covered. So you can be illegal, but it has to be based on overstaying a visa.
But also I want to be clear. It's I think the way I see it is it's the electronic I-94s. So if you were issued, it's different. If you were issued
paper or it says paper or electronic.
It does paper. Okay. Sorry,
right.
I thought that's
then we've got also people that were issued visas prior to arrival, because you get biometrics at the consulates. People in removal proceedings. So you could be somebody who entered the country without inspection. There's 4 million people almost that are in removal proceedings in the United States in one place or another. Their wait is so long.
Right, but again, removal proceedings and have been fingerprinted, because not everybody in removal proceedings has been fingerprinted.
Right. Correct. That's sort of that's the given here, is that the one common denominator. These are people that a lot of people in these categories. If you got an employment authorization document, you do have to get biometrics for that. If you've applied for a lawful permanent residence, if you have an adjustment application pending, you are going to get fingerprinted as part of that process. So you're not going to have to register separately for this, because you're going to be getting fingerprinted. Usually the fingerprinting happens 4 to 6 or 7 weeks after you file that application. And then people with border crossing cards on there. Those are all, that is a lot of people, but it's not entry without inspection, which is the one group that they want. And we'll talk about in a second about that group. Right now, if you're 14 years or older, and you apply for you would be covered on this if you came on a non-immigrant visa and you were under the age of 14. When you turn 14, you have to go and now do the registration.
Right.
Also,
and it's within 30 days of your 14th birthday.
Yeah, Canadians.
And the parents are the ones that are held accountable.
Do you think the Canadians are being forced to come in and register as some kind of statement about them? Because that was a lot of people are surprised that Canadians who are now going to be required to come in. Was that unintentional, you think, or very deliberate? I don't know. I don't. Well, actually, you know what? They did say that in here. Who is not registered? No, it's intentional because
Canadian visitors who entered the United States at land port entries and not issued evidence of registration. Yeah.
Yeah. So the group that here are your primary targets: aliens who entered the country without inspection and parole. That's basically people who cross the border, the southern border. Canadian visitors, who and Canadians normally get 6 months on entry on there. I know a lot of people in the country music industry are going to be freaking out about this because there's a lot of Canadians that are in Nashville.
I also want to point out that it's I don't know if we said this, but it doesn't apply to anyone who's coming to the U.S. going to be here for less than 30 days. So if you're leaving within 30 days, you
that's correct. So if you're just coming shopping over at, in Niagara Falls or whatever, you're crossing the border over there to go to Buffalo for the day, to the Walmart there, you're fine. We're talking about people that are coming to spend the winter in Arizona or Florida are going to have to come in now and register. That's a lot of snowbirds that are going to be in for a surprise. And then we have DACA, which is a little bit of a surprise as well, because DACA, you have to get biometrics. I don't understand why DACA would be included.
Yeah, there's no. I can't think of anybody who has a DACA application that hasn't been. I mean, they won't. They're not. Well, maybe those. The only people I can think of is those who applied after the court cases that they, when there was a period when they were accepting applications that they haven't adjudicated.
Right.
Well, that's the only people I can think of that have a DACA application that haven't been fingerprinted at some point, because everybody who has DACA has been fingerprinted.
But this is the group right here that I'm most concerned about, obviously, the entries without inspections. And there is a lot of discussion happening nationally in the immigration bar and amongst our clients about what to do. So first thing I would tell people is there's nothing to do yet. This is an announcement about, something that they're planning on doing. And it involves rolling out an electronic program. Anybody who's followed USCIS and the history of rolling out electronic programs knows that this is probably the worst agency in the country when it comes to its success in rolling out electronic programs. In fact, there was a huge scandal, ProPublica reported on it, where over 10 years, all of the premium processing money that was collected over 10 years, Ari, was used to develop an electronic system that got scrapped. It was $2 billion that they spent on this system. And I like to tell people that this is $2 billion of money from 20-year-old $2 billion when $2 billion was worth something.
That's a lot of $5 million investments.
I was like, it was the cost of 2 Dallas Cowboy stadiums. If you just want to kind of put it in perspective of how much that software bill was that they spent on that. So now they're saying, get ready, we're rolling out this new registration system and all that. It's but they didn't put a date on here. They just said, we're going to update the web page to provide additional information in the coming days. It's okay. So that's just my aside. It's I believe, it's a little premature to announce this when they, without actually having the software even built yet. And I'm guessing that they just started working on this in the last couple of days. This administration's only a month old. It is not easy to develop government software. There's a great book called Recoding America that is all about that, and it is about why these software projects take years to pull off. So good luck, USCIS. The second thing I wanted to, mention on here is sort of like people are asking, like, what are the penalties if you don't comply? So, it's our job to tell you what the law says, and we told you who's going to be covered under this program. But it's also our job to basically make sure people understand what the penalties are. And that's the part that's a little bit fuzzier. It's a misdemeanor, but misdemeanors are, people say a misdemeanor, that's like littering. That's not serious. No, misdemeanors can be serious. You can go to jail for many months for committing a criminal misdemeanor, but it is not a felony. So that's point one. It also there are fines that are associated with this. I don't know what the level of the fines are. I think basically there's another section of the act that says for certain statute violations. I'm going to need to research a little bit more what that involves. The other thing is that I wanted to show something from my. A lot of you probably have seen me with Chuck Cook and I litigate on a lot of things together. Our firms do that through our impact litigation, and Chuck had posted something that was interesting on X today. Let me see if I can switch to that. Hang on a second. Let me get to see if I can. I want to see if I can find Chuck's. Where was it? Here we go. This is his post today, and I think it's worth telling people who we went over some of this stuff already. Canadians with that visa stamps are covered. Undocumented immigrants who are not in removal proceedings who have not filed for asylum. That's the other group that's worth noting. And DACA app recipients, which Chuck couldn't understand that either. TPS recipients without an EAD. Most TPS recipients have an EAD, but that's another group. If you're in the TPS category and you never got an employment card, you are now required to register. So Chuck was going through this thing about how he's advising clients, and he's right. He's like, we cannot tell you not to register. I'm not telling you that on there, but I did think it was interesting when he was talking about what the penalties were going to be for this. Maximum $1,000 fine. Chuck didn't. I think Chuck didn't seem to think this was like the worst on there. 6 months in jail is not good, and this is not immigration detention. This is jail on here. I mean, so I don't think I'd be too excited to be in a state or a federal prison. Although I understand they're laying off a lot of people from the federal prisons right now. So I don't know what the situation is going to be in federal prisons in the next couple of months when they're laying off huge chunks of the Bureau of Prisons. But Chuck had made the point on here that this can affect he looked at it in a different light. We didn't mention the fact that this could potentially screw up. If you're convicted, it can be game over potentially for you as far as getting into a legal immigration status in the U.S. I think that's a really serious consequence on there. Chuck and I think this is where we differ, where he was basically saying that they have no capacity to really have that much of a dent on 6 million people that they believe are required to register here. There was news this week, though, that Kristi Noem put out saying basically reprioritizing the entire Department of Justice to make immigration-related prosecutions their number one thing. Not all the other it's like there's a lot of horrible federal crimes that happen out there. Now, apparently, all those take a second. Insider traders go to town. People that are dumping toxic chemicals in the river go to town and all that, because apparently Department of Justice is not going to be enforcing any of that stuff. They're basically spending all their energy working on immigration-related crimes. And this is what I think. I don't think the timing of these announcements were coincidental. I think Pam Bondi's announcement on the on immigration-related prosecutions and Kristi Noem's announcement of this program are lockstep together. And my guess is this is what the Department of Justice, if you're a Department of Justice lawyer and you thought that you were going to be working on really cool things and really putting really bad people away, I have news for you. This is what you're going to be doing for the next 4 years in this administration, is trying people who didn't fill out a form.
You might as well have joined ICE.
So I disagree with Chuck about his conclusion there that this is not something that the government's going to take seriously from a prosecution standpoint. I think at least for a while, at some point, I think the American public is going to wake up to the fact that prosecutions are not happening on a lot of serious crimes because there's nobody around that's to work on it. They're all working on this nonsense. But until that could be a while before we get to that point. So that's all I have to say about that. But I wanted to point that out. I think Chuck, he raises good points here, that it's regarding this is going to depend on enforcement for this to really have consequences. I just think we differ on whether we think there's going to be enforcement. I do. But I also, we'll have to see. So that being the case, the only other thing I'll mention to folks is that there's 4 million cases sitting in the backlog right now. If you do register, a lot of people that are going to register, if you got put into immigration proceedings, you've been here for more than 10 years, you have U.S. citizen spouses or permanent resident spouses or kids, you have no criminal records and all that, you might have good cancellation cases. You should talk to your immigration lawyer about whether getting the proceedings would be the end of the world on there. But that being said, that's for some, it's still 10 years we're talking about, and there's no work authorization. I think that was one of the announcements that was made early on, is the Trump administration is trying to say that they're not going to be giving work authorization documents to people that are put in removal proceedings on there, which they normally have been getting on there. And that might be litigated as well, because if you're not willing to give people their day in court on there, is it really, can you really deny them?
Let me clarify. Not everybody who's in proceedings. There's certain, for example, we're really talking about asylum applicants get work authorization, and not even all asylum applicants, but most people who are in proceedings don't have work, or don't have work authorization based on being in proceedings. They might have something else like adjustment of status that's pending.
Right, but I think they said that once they've been denied an asylum application, that they wouldn't renew them in proceedings. I think that was what the change was.
Yeah, I believe that's what they were saying. Yeah.
Right.
Which,
anyway,
I believe that would require Congress to make that change, not.
So we've spent a good chunk of our normal hour already talking about all this stuff. We're not getting off the air until we answer the questions. There aren't that many of them, so I apologize that we've taken so long. But there was a lot of stuff this week. So let's go to some of the questions. So I Love America, who's been here before. Do we foresee more layoffs at USCI? As 50 probable staff so far, but more to come reported. It's really hard to say. And actually, having just come from Washington, and I have my daughter who lives there has lots of friends who work in federal government and all that. It seems like the story changes like hour to hour there as far as who's being fired. I do know that in this budget bill that passed yesterday, it's sort of a blueprint for a budget. But they have basically, what this bill does is it sends to each one of these big committees in the House orders for how much they're supposed to cut. And several of these agencies and these committees, they're like, you have to cut $200 billion. You have to cut $100 billion and all that. And so I think that's where we're going to be seeing a lot of stuff, as well as just the actual Congress going along and cutting the budgets for these agencies. And it's a lot tougher to fight if Congress actually passes budget cuts, that's going to affect it. With that being said, they're trying to spend a lot of money right now, new money, on immigration enforcement. So basically, DHS is going to get more money, and a lot of what USCIS does is not just adjudicate benefits, but they have an enforcement arm as well through FDNS and others. And also, they are, they're supposed to be basically carefully reviewing applications to make sure there's not fraud and all that. So arguably, they have a enforcement function. I'm guessing that USCIS is going to be left alone. They're also primarily fee funded. So it's a little, it's a little self-defeating when the, when the agency doesn't have that much of an impact on the U.S. budget at all through fee-funded programs. I could see them cutting the programs that are not fee-funded. That's also a little self-defeating, like asylum, for example. If they cut asylum officers, I could see them doing that just to be mean on there. But asylum officers, all that means is that people are going to be waiting longer and longer in a legal status in the United States for an asylum hearing. So that doesn't seem like
asylum officers aren't just asylum. I mean, they're USCIS officers who do asylum cases. So it's not really a separate position. So I don't know if they're those people, but they may reassign them somewhere else.
I think they would actually, for a lot of those people have very specialized training as asylum officers. And I would disagree with you that they can just be plugged in somewhere else. I think for a lot of people, that is the sole reason they're working at the agency, is because they work on those cases. Anyway, with that being said, if those cases take a lot longer to work on, these people are not leaving the United States. They are entitled by law to work authorization while they are here and waiting. And if it takes them 15 years to get an asylum appointment instead of 5 years to get an asylum appointment, I'm not sure how that advances the Trump agenda. So this is a lot to say that we don't know. We don't know where what's going to be happening as far as numbers go. I'm not sure that people at USCIS have any better understanding right now of what's happening, and I'm guessing people even at the top of the agency are not really sure what's happening on there.
Well, I also have no idea. To me though, Greg, that the government's halt or delay halt, whatever they want to say, call it, of adjudication of asylum applications is actually going to potentially result in more asylees, those with asylum applications, being eligible for work authorization.
Yeah,
potentially, yeah.
Yeah. All right. There was another question as well from our friend out of America about the new registration requirement for whether it's for undocumented or all non-citizens. So, as we pointed out
in the category,
yes, there are specific groups that are accepted, some big groups that are accepted. So, and some undocumented folks are accepted as well, including those that are in removal proceedings that have been received biometrics or have asylum applications pending and they've been fingerprinted as a result of that. So I think just the short answer on that is just do the quick Google registration in USCIS and you'll see that document that we were talking about on the screen before. Go through that list. One thing that we didn't point, they did say that they were urging people to set up a USCIS online account on there. So it's probably fine to do that. The only thing I will say, after
I wouldn't, if someone's doing that just because I wouldn't run to go do that yet.
Right. I think, and I was going to say mainly that should be people that probably don't really care that much about whether the government knows where they're located. Exactly. I wouldn't do that for necessarily if that is something that is a concern to you. But like I said, those Canadians that are here, they don't care about whether the government knows where they are. They just need to, so for that group, I think then go ahead and do that. By the way, it still is a lot of work to set up a new process on their end. So just because there's a front end where you can set up an account doesn't mean that it's just like, oh, they just have to do, put a couple of questions together and pops right out. There's a rulemaking process that you have to go through when you have a new form on there. It's not like they can just throw these questions up there and they don't have to actually go through a process of publishing it in the Federal Register and going through a notice and comment and all that. So it'll be interesting to see how that works. Although I don't know if there's some kind of emergency exception to that, but I don't think that they're going to qualify for that. Anyway, that's more on that. Can a company help its employees apply for a green card? The answer to that is yes.
Yes. Well, the answer is potentially. It depends on someone who is not out of status potentially can't benefit from that. I'm not going to say all people, because there are some categories of people who are out of status that would be able to benefit from it. Right. But what happens is, okay, so a company can sponsor someone. There are several processes that someone can do that. Sponsor an employee for a green card. Whether or not the person can benefit from that sponsorship is a separate question, and it really just has to be determined on a case-by-case basis. Basically, if someone's interested in being sponsored by their company, or a company is interested in sponsoring them, they should have a conversation with their immigration lawyer.
I've seen some companies do some things that I like, though, which is that one company that I've worked with over the years, they have this policy where they will pay. They have on retainer an immigration lawyer that will talk to their employees, but they are instructed not to report back to the employer on any of the conversations on there. And it's kind of a nice thing where the employer, is giving access to to somebody who understands the law for their employees, but they're not putting themselves in a position where they are in the middle of it, especially if there's nothing that they can do for the person on there. But that is, so sometimes employers can be helpful by providing that type of resource to their workers.
Now, I will say one group that doesn't always know that they could be helped is those who had DACA and got DACA when they were under 18, or actually before they turned 18 and a half, and have had DACA continuously. They have the ability, even though they're not in quote unquote status, as non-immigrant status as we refer to it, but they potentially have the ability to have their company sponsor them, and if they're able to stay in status in DACA, to then consular process.
Yeah, for non-immigrant visa.
So I do have clients that come in that are on DACA that not everybody that's on DACA, but those that were under 18 and a half when they got DACA and continuously done it, who we are able to have their company sponsor them, even though they're in an authorized period of stay, but they're not in status.
Yeah,
in the valid non-immigrant status.
I think the quick answer on this, though, Ari, is that there are a lot of screening questions that an immigration lawyer needs to go through to figure out whether a lot of it has to do with the type of worker that we're talking about. It has to do with their immigration history that we're talking about. There's a lot of variations on these cases, so there's not a simple answer to this. But
as a general rule, the employers the companies can do what they need to do to try and sponsor someone. I mean, pretty much in every case that there's a possibility of it. But not everybody can benefit without a change in the law, can benefit from those that sponsorship. So
yeah. By the way, I like that piece of art, Estrella. Okay, let's move on to Fred, who's asking, and this is sort of like, it's a very specific question about a particular bill, and I haven't read this bill, but I do know that there are a number of bills, a load of bills that have been introduced on variations of this theme of creating.
It doesn't look like this bill has gone anywhere yet.
There's been a lot of bills that are designed to make smaller offenses removable. One, I would say normally I wouldn't take it that seriously, except we had the Lack and Riley bill already passed earlier this year. And that was one that really lowered the bar for who can be removable or not. So this doesn't, I don't want to say don't worry about this on here. I will say though that when they're talking about things involving U.S. citizens, it gets to be more serious. I would guess that there will probably be a little more scrutiny on the part of for members of Congress to passing something that involves the rights of citizens, but nothing surprises me anymore. So I don't. Your question: do I foresee the litigation bill passing? I don't know.
Right.
I would think that there's probably more to come as far as immigration bills passing that are designed to to go after more and more offenses, even the minor ones. But I just don't know.
And I'm going to use this time to do a little public service announcement to our listeners. If you are not a U.S. citizen, I mean, even if you are a U.S. citizen, but if you're not a U.S. citizen, especially if you've been drinking at all, do not get behind the wheel. I mean, that's true for everybody, but there are, I don't want to make this seem just because it's not DUI itself a deportable offense. There are immigration consequences to having DUIs, and more importantly, almost every time one of my clients gets arrested for something, there's almost always alcohol involved, okay, yes. or drugs involved.
Take Uber.
Stay sober. Well, I mean, stay sober, but if you're not staying sober, stay in your home. And even to stay in your home, if you are not if you are not able to control yourself when you've been drinking, if you drink to excess, don't do it. Just understand that again, so often the stupid things that people do that get them put in immigration proceedings and in removal deportation proceedings, it started with them drinking too much and then just doing something stupid. So yeah, it's very important, especially for all of our listeners out there.
Yeah, that's a good point. Although I will say, driving in general is probably driving in general without a driver's license is probably the easiest way that people get themselves put into immigration proceedings.
Right.
Something related to it.
I mean, again, if you've been drinking.
But I'm saying, like, even if you haven't been drinking on there, if you have a broken taillight, you have tinted windows, there's like a million things you can get pulled over for. And as soon as you get pulled over, most states you can't get a driver's license if you are undocumented. And that's the first thing. And that makes it easy for them to arrest you and send you off and put you on an ICE detainer, is driving without a license. That's all it takes in a lot of places. So my suggestion is, don't drive without a driver's license. That is the easiest way to end your American journey on there. It would be, to if you want to be on a fast track to ICE detention, that's one of the ways to do that. Jose, you're very kind. Thank you. Appreciate that. Or you're not even looking. So I'm going to move on.
I saw it. Yes, thank you. Sorry.
And then Jason Sasser, not to be confused with Jason Susser.
By the way, I read that and I'm like, why is Jason Susser, one of our partners, Jason Susser is, I thought, why is he posting on here?
Yeah.
Jason Sasser.
We used to have a Senator Sasser in Tennessee, James Sasser. He was a good guy. He brought pandas to Tennessee. That was his claim to fame, and now they took them away recently.
Oh, yeah, the pandas like this.
Anyway, so the question was, has anything changed with respect to I-360s for special immigrant juveniles, the SIJ cases?
I I'm not aware of
not since the Biden changes from a couple of years ago regarding how the numbers were counting on there. There hasn't been any procedural changes in that category since Trump came in, and probably nothing that changed.
Yeah, there was
the
a
later
little bit changes last year, but nothing since Trump. Then I have not seen anything with Trump. While we were doing this, saw the question. I was trying to double check. I do not see any changes to SIJ or I-360 processing. So far from the Trump administration.
All right. So now we have our last question from Vamsey, who's attending an H-1B visa stamping, has advanced parole. And I'm trying to sort of like understand the question here. If 214 or 221,
214B or 221G, so
those are denial on one of those categories.
Denial in one of those categories, right.
Parole.
So just to play, the 214B is when the government determines that you have not shown that you have met the requirements. That's 214B, and 221G is a situation where the government needs more information. So it's like a request
administrative processing,
right? Or they just want to sit around and take forever to issue their.
So the question is, can you come back on advanced parole and then go back again when you're called back? The answer is yes.
Yeah, you can do that.
We see that all the time.
Yeah.
Yes, so that's it, Ari. Took us an hour and 15 minutes to get through.
Did we talk last week about the interview waivers? We did, right? I don't remember if we did or didn't. That made me think of this.
If we did, well, so that is one. I don't know.
We did. I remember.
So, Lynn talked about it. All right, so I am actually not here next week. I'm on a I'm on a family trip, so I'm not going to be here. Ari, I hope I don't know if you will, but
I think
you will be here. It could be Lynn, it could be Elisa, it could be some new faces. We will see, but we will have this call next week. But I will be out next week. I will be back immediately. I will be back the week following, unless on this place that I'm going on this trip, I can get decent internet access and I can basically escape family for an hour and they won't disown me.
But
I will probably not be there.
Live stream. So join us. It'll be good even without Greg. Maybe not as good, but still good.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you guys, and I appreciate you. So many of you coming every week. And if you have questions, save them for next week, and we'll try and get some of them answered.
Or you can always schedule a consultation with one of our attorneys.
That's right. Hold on. I put there's an announcement on the where was that? Reach us at visalaw.com. Go there and you can schedule an appointment with one of us.
Make it real easy for you to schedule an appointment through our website. So also, I just want to, the disclaimer, we are immigration lawyers, but we are not your immigration lawyer. Maybe someday we will be, but so everything we're giving you is for information purposes only. Don't rely on what we're saying here as immigration advice without speaking to one of our attorneys or another qualified.
Look, I have the disclaimer on.
Thank you. I love that.
All right. Well, everybody have I hope today didn't get you more stressed out than well, I'm sure it was stressful for some, but
it'll be okay. We
always hope that the next week will be better.
All right.
All right. Bye, everybody.